His wife said she loved him, but her girls' trip uncovered a secret so cold it could end any marriage. They say when a man finds out his wife is cheating, the world turns gray. Mine turned technicolor. Every little thing exploded in vivid detail. The clink of her spoon in the coffee mug, the smell of her hairspray, the sound of her heels walking away from me. But let's rewind a little. I wasn't always the fool. No, I started as a very reasonable man. I met Claire at a mutual friend's funeral. Romantic, I know. She wore a black dress that somehow didn't make her look like she was in mourning, and I spilled coffee on her heel. That was our beginning. She didn't scowl, didn't hiss at me, just laughed and said, "Well, now I have a reason to buy new shoes." I should have known then. She never needed a reason to start over. Claire had this way of making chaos feel like charm. She could forget your birthday and make you apologize for remembering hers. She believed in honesty the way politicians believe in the people, useful only when convenient. Still, I married her. It wasn't out of desperation or loneliness. I was doing fine. My accounting firm was growing. I had a condo with a view and a cat named Martin who hated everyone but me. But Claire, she was this storm that made my safe life feel less like a spreadsheet and more like a movie. And I, poor idiot, thought that was love. We moved into a 2-story house in the suburbs. She picked the color of the walls. I paid the mortgage. Fair deal. Our life was, from the outside, immaculate. She hosted book clubs with wine and fake smiles. I grilled chicken and asked our guests how traffic was. We were the kind of couple people pointed at and said, "They have it all figured out." And I, again, poor idiot, believed them. Tuesdays were for gardening. Claire had a thing for roses, which she never actually planted. She'd buy them, pose with them, and post a photo with a caption like, "Therapy in bloom rose sparkles." Then she'd hand me the gloves and disappear inside to call her sister. Or so I thought. It wasn't her sister. The signs were there. The late returns from yoga, the perfume that wasn't hers, the sudden interest in poetry despite her well-documented hatred for metaphor. But I trusted her. That's my sin, I suppose. Not the love, not the loyalty, just the blind, stupid trust. One afternoon, I came home early from work. That never happens. I'm the type who arrives at 8:58 and leaves at 6:02. But that day, I had a headache. Something tight and sharp behind my eyes. Maybe the universe giving me a warning shot. I parked in front of our house and saw Claire's car already there. Yoga on Tuesdays ended at 6. It was 4:30. I walked in quiet. Not sneaky, just tired. I wasn't expecting betrayal. I was expecting maybe her humming while folding laundry, maybe a glass of wine, half full, forgotten on the counter. What I heard instead was laughter. A man's laughter. Now, if this were a movie, I'd burst in and catch them mid-sin. But life isn't so dramatic. No moaning, no lipstick stains on shirts. Just two voices, hers, lilting and light, and his, deep and smug. I followed the sound to the den. The door was half open. I didn't step in. I just stood there, behind it, like a ghost in my own home. "He still doesn't suspect a thing," Claire said, her tone casual, like discussing the weather. "He's sweet, but clueless. Always has been." The man chuckled. "You ever think about just telling him?" "God, no." He'd crumble. It's almost cruel. They both laughed then, like I was a joke they shared. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stood there, cataloging every word like a court stenographer in hell. And then, quietly, I walked out. Got back in my car. Drove around the block 5 times. When I finally came home again, they were gone. Her yoga mat was in the trunk, freshly unrolled. Dinner was half cooked. She kissed my cheek and asked me about my day. And I, poor idiot, smiled and told her it was fine. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the performance that followed. And I, ever the accountant, began collecting data. I needed to know how deep the lie went. Because once you start doubting the love, everything becomes a calculation. I started keeping a spreadsheet. I called it Project St. Clair. Password protected, hidden 3 folders deep inside my tax software. No one would ever look there. It had columns: date, time, alibi, deviation, emotional temperature. That last one was subjective: smile intensity, eye contact, use of pet names. Claire didn't know it, but every time she kissed me goodnight or sent a heart emoji, I filed it under evidence. Some nights I'd sit at the kitchen island with my laptop, pretending to review a client's accounts while actually analyzing hers. Her patterns, her inconsistencies. I wasn't trying to catch her anymore. I already had. I just wanted to understand. Because that's the thing, isn't it? When someone betrays you, the worst part isn't the act itself. It's the unanswered question. Why? Why me? Why now? Why like this? She still slept beside me. Still asked about my mother. Still corrected my grammar in text like everything was normal. It was diabolical. Impressive in a way. Like watching a snake learn ballet. One Thursday, she left her phone on the counter while she showered. I stared at it for 20 solid minutes. I'd never looked at her phone in all our years together. That was our thing, mutual trust. The unspoken agreement of fidelity. But now? Now it was a crime scene. I didn't unlock it. I just held it in my hand like it was radioactive. That was enough. The thing buzzed twice, then once again. Messages from M. I put it down. Slowly. Like disarming a bomb. Later that night, I asked her if she still talked to Michael, her ex from before me. The artist who never paid taxes and thought monogamy was a capitalist construct. She laughed. God, no, she said. He was exhausting. Why? Just wondering, I replied, sipping my tea. Had a dream about him. You were both in it. EW. I hope it was a nightmare. I smiled. She kissed my cheek. The ledger got a new row. The following weekend, she went on a girls' trip with her friend Dana. Dana, who lived in Chicago, was conveniently tagged in a story from her own couch that Saturday night. No palm trees, no spa towels. Just a messy bun and a pizza. Claire had sent me a photo of her resort view earlier that day. I reverse image searched it. Stock photo. Royalty-free. And yet, when she returned, she brought me a souvenir fridge magnet shaped like a tiny flip-flop. Said she missed me. Said she thought about me every day. I didn't ask if the flip-flop was for the left foot or the right. I just smiled and added it to the fridge. The absurdity of it all started to amuse me. I began to notice the little details she overlooked. The scent of men's cologne on a scarf she claimed was new. The accidental text meant for someone else. Be there in 10. Don't start without me face-blowing kiss. The Uber receipts that didn't match her story. It was like watching a magician repeat the same trick with one sleeve obviously bulging. She wasn't even trying that hard anymore. Which begged the question, was she daring me to find out? Or was she so confident in my stupidity, she didn't care? One night, I decided to follow her. She said she was going to an author reading. Some feminist memoirist who survived a goat farm commune and 3 divorces. I nodded and watched her put on red lipstick, an unusual move for Claire, who normally claimed makeup was patriarchal nonsense. I waited 10 minutes, then got in my car and trailed her. I felt ridiculous. Like some more cliché, jilted husband in a beige sedan. But I couldn't stop. She didn't go downtown. She drove to a little cul-de-sac 5 neighborhoods over. Parked in front of a modest brick house with a faded basketball hoop. She rang the bell. A man answered. Mid-30s, tall, confident posture, no wedding ring. She kissed him. Long familiar. Then they went inside. I sat there in the dark, the engine running. For 20 minutes, I did nothing. Said nothing. Felt nothing. No rage. No heartbreak. Just the cold affirmation of everything I already knew. The mystery was gone. What remained was logistics. I drove home, calmly. Took a shower. Fed the cat. Poured myself a scotch and sat on the couch. When she returned 3 hours later, she said the reading was life-changing. I said, that's great. Then I kissed her forehead and asked if she wanted dinner. I made salmon. With dill and lemon. Her favorite. Because now, it was my turn to perform. I had a new plan. One that required patience, precision, and a complete suspension of morality. Claire thought she was playing a game. What she didn't realize was that I'd stopped playing and started engineering the end. You'd be surprised how many ways a man can weaponize kindness. I didn't yell. Didn't throw plates or accusations. Instead, I started bringing Claire coffee in bed. Lavender lattes with oat milk, her favorite. I let her sleep in on Sundays, started doing the laundry without being asked. I massaged her shoulders while she watched reality shows and even agreed to take couples yoga. It wasn't reconciliation. It was reconnaissance. You see, Claire had grown lazy. Comfortable. She thought the danger had passed. That I was still that sweet, blind man who watered her roses and believed her excuses. But I was watching now. Closely. The more she lied, the more I loved her, outwardly. That was the trick. I smothered her with understanding until she couldn't breathe. And she, narcissist that she is, mistook my devotion for stupidity. The man, let's call him Marcus, was a cliché. Divorced, drove a BMW, kept books on his shelf he hadn't read and wine in his rack he couldn't pronounce. He was a financial planner, ironically. Not as good as me, of course. I checked his credentials. I checked his credit score. I checked his LinkedIn endorsements. He had a weakness for attention. The kind that Claire specialized in giving smiles, small compliments, feigned admiration for the mundane. What he didn't know was that I'd joined his gym. First day, I smiled at him in the locker room like we were old friends. You look familiar, I said. Do you play squash at the club? He didn't. But he smiled back, unsure, and offered his hand. Marcus, he said. Daniel, I replied. My middle name. I figured it was time I started compartmentalizing, too. We exchanged banalities. He was charming in that low-effort, overpaid way. One of those men who believed charisma covered a multitude of sins. It took 3 more encounters before he asked what I did. I told him I worked in estate planning. Mostly boring, I said. But sometimes, I help families avoid financial collapse. He laughed. Sounds like therapy with spreadsheets. I smiled. You'd be surprised how close those two are. I started running into him everywhere. Farmers markets, coffee shops, the occasional happy hour. What a coincidence, I'd say, even when it wasn't. And slowly, I learned everything. He had a daughter, 7 years old, custody every other weekend. An ex-wife who still paid half the mortgage because her lawyer was lazy. A dog named Baxter. And a condo with a view of the city and an unsecured Wi-Fi network. It was surprisingly easy to slip into his life like a shadow. I learned his schedule, his habits, his weak spots. Claire never noticed the change in me. She was too busy curating her secret life. I imagine it was thrilling playing two men off each other like a soap opera she controlled. What she didn't realize was that both of us were lying now. One night, over dinner, she said, "You've been different lately. In a good way. Happier." I wiped my mouth and nodded. "I've found a new sense of purpose." She smiled. "That's wonderful, love. I've missed this version of you." "This version?" I repeated. "Yes. Me too." Inside, I was already counting the days. I had a number in my head, 90. That was how long I gave myself to dismantle the illusion of our marriage without her noticing. I started with the bank accounts. We had a joint savings account and several investments, mostly under my name, for tax reasons. Claire never liked looking at numbers. She trusted me to handle that boring stuff. So I began rearranging things. Gently, quietly. Certain transfers here, subtle reclassifications there. I moved funds into a trust under a different name. Not illegal, not exactly, but obscured. Blurred in a way that would take forensic accountants weeks to unravel. I hired a private investigator. Not for Claire. For Marcus. I wanted to know what he feared. What he owed. Who he had disappointed. I wanted leverage, just in case. Turns out, Marcus wasn't a saint either. There was a history of misconduct at his last job, sexual harassment complaints that never made it to court. A non-disclosure agreement, a quiet payout. Suddenly, I understood why he liked married women. Fewer complications. Less fallout. I printed the report and sealed it in an envelope. Labeled it, for later. At night, I lay next to Claire and imagined telling her I knew everything. I fantasized about her face contorting, her voice stammering. But not yet. Timing was everything. Instead, I kissed her shoulder and whispered, "I'm so lucky to have you." She curled into me, sighing like a woman at peace. And I studied the ceiling and counted the cracks. The truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't knock. It kicks the door in and leaves nothing standing. And I, being the last honest man, planned to be standing right there when it happened, with the matchbook in my pocket. There's a strange calm that settles in once you've accepted the end. Not grief, not even anger, just an eerie quiet. Like the moment before a building is demolished. Everything's still standing, but you know the foundation's already gone. That's where I was. Claire was in full performance mode. She made pancakes on Sundays, wore lingerie on Thursdays, and even suggested we try for a baby soon. That last one nearly made me laugh. A baby? Imagine planting seeds in soil you already salted. I nodded, smiled, kissed her cheek. "Let's talk about it after your trip," I said. Because of course, she had another girl's trip planned. This time to Vermont. She said Dana's friend had a cabin, and they were going to unplug, detox, realign their chakras. I didn't bother pretending to believe it. I helped her pack. Even printed her boarding pass. She left on a Friday morning with a suitcase that smelled faintly of Marcus's cologne. I waited until her flight was in the air, then made a phone call. Marcus had a standing appointment at a cigar bar every Friday at 6. I knew this because I'd sat across the street for 3 weeks in a row, watching him clink glasses with men who looked like they divorced their wives for sport. I showed up at 5:45. Clean shirt, calm expression, envelope in hand. "Marcus," I said, as he approached his table. He blinked. "Daniel, hey, small world again." "Yeah," I said, and slid into the booth across from him. "But today I'm not here for the cigars." He looked at the envelope like it might explode. "What's this?" "A gift," I said. "Consider it insurance." He opened it. Inside was the full report. Harassment settlements, complaints, internal memos, all conveniently unsealed. Along with a copy of a notarized statement from an old coworker I'd paid handsomely to speak on the record. He skimmed it, face tightening. "Where the hell did you get this?" "I have resources," I said, "and a vested interest." "What do you want?" I leaned back. "You're going to break up with Claire. Clean. Convincing. Today." He snorted. "You think she's just going to believe?" "She won't need to believe anything. I'll handle that part. You just disappear. If you don't, I send that folder to your firm. Your daughter's school. Your ex-wife's attorney." He opened his mouth. Closed it. "Jesus," he said. "You're insane." "No," I said, smiling. "I'm meticulous." He didn't argue. I left before the ice in my glass melted. By Sunday, Claire was home. Smelled like hotel soap and disappointment. She barely touched her dinner. Barely spoke. I asked if everything was okay. She hesitated. Then shrugged. Just tired. Weird weekend. I nodded sympathetically. Those spa retreats are exhausting. That night, she cried in the bathroom. I didn't ask why. She didn't tell me. The next morning, she woke up early, made coffee, kissed me like it meant something. I pretended not to notice the way her hands trembled. I waited 4 more days. Then I left my phone unlocked on the counter by accident. Opened to a photo I'd taken of her and Marcus in front of his house. The one where she kissed him like I was already dead. She found it at lunch. I was in the garage when she burst in. Her voice was jagged. What the hell is this? I looked up from the drill I wasn't using. Proof. You followed me. You were spying on me. I met her eyes. I gave you 5 years of loyalty, Claire. You gave me 5 months of lies. I'd say we're even. She didn't deny it. Didn't offer the usual lines. Just stood there, blinking like she was trying to reboot. I can explain. No, you can't, I said. But you will. She collapsed into a chair like her bones had turned to water. It all spilled out then. The affair, yes. But more. She'd been seeing Marcus off and on for 2 years. There were others before him. Some short, some anonymous. Hotel liaisons during conferences, strangers she met on flights, a co-worker from her old job she said meant nothing. It wasn't personal, she said. That was the worst part. It wasn't personal. As if that made it better. I listened, expressionless. Not because I didn't feel, but because I'd already bled all I had. I was empty now. Just a man recording testimony. When she was done, she asked, so what now? I stood. What now is simple. I've filed for divorce. Her eyes went wide. You're ending this. Just like that. I laughed. Cold. You ended this 2 years ago. I'm just cleaning up the paperwork. I walked out before she could answer. Back inside, the house felt cleaner. The silence finally honest. They say the truth sets you free. That's only half right. The truth burns the house down, and if you're lucky, you walk away from the ashes with your eyes open. And maybe, just maybe, a plan for what comes next. The day the divorce was finalized, Claire sent me a single text. You didn't have to be so cruel. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I turned off my phone and poured myself a drink. Cruel. Funny word, coming from someone who used my heart like a spare room. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many. And none of them, I realized, would make her understand. She never operated on the same emotional currency. For Claire, guilt was optional. Like dessert or seatbelts. After she moved out, the house was strangely clean. Not because she took much, she didn't. A few suitcases, some framed photos, her yoga mat. But the emotional debris, the noise of her daily deception, had evaporated. It was just me and the silence. And Martin the cat, who seemed deeply unimpressed by the entire ordeal. I kept gardening. Funny, right? The roses she never actually planted were still there, my work. I pruned them like it mattered, even when it didn't. There was something therapeutic about it. Predictable. Honest. You cut a dead stem. It doesn't lie to you. It just dies. One afternoon, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. Aisle 7. Baking supplies. He saw me before I saw him. Did that little flinch guilty men do when they see the ghost of their bad decisions? I gave him a nod. Just enough to acknowledge. He looked thinner. Grayer. His eyes darted around like he expected the ground to open. Good. He walked past me without a word. I didn't stop him. Some men get prison. Others get a mirror. Claire emailed once 2 months after the divorce. Subject line, closure. The message was polite. Polished. Said she hoped I was finding peace, that she missed the version of us that worked. No apology. No confession. Just curated nostalgia. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to a folder labeled Dead Files. Instead, I did something radical. I lived. I took a trip, first solo vacation in years. I went to Portugal. Ate fish by the sea. Drank port with a retired Dutch couple who had been married for 40 years and still bickered like teenagers. It was beautiful. I even laughed. Real, unfiltered laughter. The kind that doesn't echo off the walls of a lie. Back home, I sold the house. Moved into a smaller place. A rental. With ugly curtains and a leaky faucet. But it was mine. All mine. No ghosts. No lipstick-stained wine glasses hiding betrayal. I deleted the spreadsheet. Project St. Clair. Gone. Not because I forgave her, God no. But because I no longer needed the data. I knew the truth. In full. She betrayed me. Repeatedly. Efficiently. Without remorse. And I let her. That's the part I've wrestled with most. Not her lies, but my silence. The nights I said nothing. The dinners I cooked knowing what she'd done. The time I kissed her cheek after she came home from another man's bed. That's the real wound. Not the knife, but how long I let it stay in. And yet, there's a strange kind of grace in surviving something like that. It rearranges you. burns off the parts that trusted too easily. What's left is leaner, sharper, fireproof. These days, people ask if I'll ever remarry. I say, not yet. Not no. Just not yet. Because I'm not looking for the storm anymore. I'm looking for someone who knows what it costs to rebuild. And until then, I've got my roses, my cat, and my quiet. And on most days, that's more than enough. They say betrayal teaches you who others really are. That's not quite true. Betrayal teaches you who you are when there's nothing left to pretend about. And if you're lucky, you walk out of the wreckage not bitter, not broken, but honest. Thanks for sticking around and listening to my story. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss more true life stories just like this one.